Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday, and here we are at the Church of the Palms, and I am Kathy Futrell. We're going to be doing some perspective exercises, and then we're going to start painting it's a landscape with some architecture. Okay, see you in a minute. And this is a drawing from a sketchbook that I did from my backyard Wednesday a week ago. And what I did is I set up on my back porch, and I found that my eye level. I was a little elevated, but here was my eye level. So when you do perspective, what you have to do is you have to find that this is called the horizon line, or the eye level of anything that you're drawing. And this is the vanishing point for a 1-point perspective. So the point is, the point is, no pun intended, that all the lines of the architecture, for instance, the bottom of this post and the bottom of this post line up with this line that leads itself, and this lines up with all of the bricks that are on the patio. I mean, it's just everything goes, everything. The top of this table, the top of this table, the top of these chairs, the bottom of this side of this extension of my house goes to that vanishing point. The roof line goes to that vanishing point. This is very short here because I'm almost on top of it, but the edge of this building goes to that vanishing point, and this goes to the vanishing point. The whole point, and even over here, where this part of the building is, and if I were to draw the floor inside this room, well, it's a little elevated, but it still would go to that vanishing point, and it would still rest on this line. That's called 1-point perspective. So what I want to illustrate for you is how to draw a 1-point perspective, and then what we're going to do is we're going to have to figure out where our 1-point perspective is in our drawing. So what I have here is that when you have a drawing like this, when you have your own drawing that you're going to be doing of a particular place, and this might help you, is if you have, in this case, we are drawing a 2-point perspective, so we have to draw all the lines. I'll just turn this over so I can show you what I'm talking about. The lines of this building, gosh, I haven't actually tried this to see if it works. If I were to draw this, all right, so my eye level is going to be about right up here from where I was actually I was standing, and I took a photograph of this. Oh, it's the same photograph that I have right here. So yes, we are going to be inspired by John Singer Sargent, and this is a beautiful example of how perspective can be used in the simplest form, because you will see that as things move away from you, they tend to get smaller. Have you ever seen a building where you're looking at an angle and you can tell that it recedes in space, Well, that's what's happening here. And if you ever noticed how people on a sidewalk way down look really tiny, and yet the ones that are up close to you, it's the scale, it's the diminishing scale that's what creates a sense of depth when we draw, when we paint. So the lines here are going into this space. It would be a point way out here. So I could even draw, if I were just taking this one photograph, I could figure out roughly where the vanishing point would be. Now I'll see if my drawing, and then I'm going to sketch and paint for you, but first we'll do some exercises so you get the point. I would draw these lines out, and they should converge at a point out here. The problem when you draw like this, you really can't plot your point within your piece of paper. You've got to think about it as being out in this area here. So I'm a little shy of getting this exactly right. Okay, off that point. This one, I'm pretty close to it. Okay, so I did what is called, I eyeballed my perspective. Now, this perspective is a little different because it's going off in this direction. So let me also show you with this, which is what we're going to do next week. So I was starting to do this painting the other day, so I'd like to have a painting to show you. Today we're going to attempt to do these plants, and I think I've decided to cut this into a different composition And if you notice the plants I have here, they are here at Selby Gardens and they're a rounded bowl. But I chose to take John Singer Sargent's pots and put them in my painting. So you can make your pots any pot you want to make. But what happens as these pots move into space, they're like those people. They get smaller. This block that it's sitting on is a concrete little stand for the plants. It's not as complicated as drawing what Sargent did here with this beautiful balustrade, or rather these are, what would you call that? This is like a wall with
little columns.
With little tiny columns, exactly. And it's very decorative and very beautiful and very old world. And I find that here, even in the architecture of the building here, I think that might have attracted me, but I could not find the same situation of Sargent's pots on a wall like that. So I found this, and I said, that'll work, that'll work. So just to show you that what can happen with a perspective here is that you can find the vanishing point, and I'll just flip this page over. And so the vanishing point, again, when we draw these, sometimes we say these are difficult to do, but they're really not that difficult. The vanishing point here, and I've already played with this one, so I had to correct it, and I was able to get the vanishing point to all work out. And so here the lines go, but also I was able to correct my drawing by using this little trick or device, and I was able to get a longer ruler and decide, oh yeah, my horizon line was the same. So this is a 2-point perspective. Now, with that said, let's do the exercise that we're going to do today. It may sound complicated, but it's really not. And you're going to get a piece of paper, just like this, a plain piece of paper. And what we're going to do is take a ruler and a pencil, and we'll divide our paper in half. Let me just move this just to keep it from being confusing. Yes, we are going to do watercolor today, but I want you to understand perspective. We're going to do a quick little exercise with 1 point. Now, this is just a dividing line. We're going to do a 1 point here. So what did I call this line? Horizon line. And it represents what? Eye level. Good. And what's that little dot called? Vanishing point. Okay, good. Now, on that vanishing point, if we wanted to draw usually our eye level, if we're looking at a building, our eye level will be somewhere, I'm just drawing, I should use the rulers that are making this sort of rough. Okay, let's say this is a house. That's the front door. This is the front door of a house. Okay, it would be true. This is a little house. This is it's not a tree house, it's a playhouse. Okay, so if I'm looking at that house straight on, and the house is we see the front of the house, but we also see the side of the house. And then we know that there's a little roof, and all roofs do. Oh, here's how we determine where the roof is going to be. The front, we have to find that point. And then we can draw the top of the roof going down, and then we can make the side. There's always an overhang. That's what I wanted to say. So if we only see the side of the building going back, if we have, in most true 1 point perspectives, the buildings are, we don't usually see buildings where we're looking up on the hillside, because then we don't see the roof at all. But, well, there's really no way to show that. Okay, that's not going to work. Oh, I know. I was just going to draw a box. So if we were seeing the box, we would see the bottom of the box if it were up here, but we really don't see the sides, do we? I guess it could be a house. Yes, it could be a house, but then we would have to put a hill here for that house, wouldn't we? All right, so if we were drawing a box down below, and that would mean that the house was below our eye level, then that becomes a very different situation. And how would we draw the box going back? Well, we would have to go to the vanishing point. And so this would be truly just a box. We could stop the box, And we could shade it if we wanted to, but that would just be the way the box would look. Now, if we have a 2-point perspective, so let's say that you just try drawing one box, either one side or the other, to that, because most of the eye levels are going to hit 3/4 up on a door. You're going to walk to a door, it's going to be your eye level. If you're going to do a 2-point, that means that your building or your shelf of pots are going to be placed either, well, let's do this. First, before I start drawing the boxes, let's just make a vanishing point way out here. And then what we'll do is we'll draw several lines which will represent the corners. And this would be looking up at something, looking down at something, and looking at something. More than likely, it's going to be this one that we would have, just like the building, just like this box that I was showing here. So the angle, it depends on how far over to one side of where you are situated. You're here in the middle, you are here in the middle. This is a rule of thumb for 2-point perspective. Your angles are going to go. Now, it's not that complicated, and I don't mean to make it complicated. So I think it helps if you stop your box and you literally find where the center would be and make it, turn it into a structure. Okay, we wouldn't see the back of it. Okay, I'm making a rooftop, and this could be a barn. Okay, then we would draw this line to that point. And then the way, oh, and this even gets more complicated, so maybe we won't talk about this, but sometimes what happens is that the roof line also, and these are arbitrary points, to be honest. I am suggesting that this roof wood angle, okay, this is how we figure it out. Then this line would go here. Now, why does that happen? Why does that look like that? Because things diminish. This is somewhat exaggerated, okay? But it's true to form. Now you can see that using this kind of perspective helps to make things look right. So what we're going to do is you have a handout that looks like, well, it's an exercise page. And you're simply going to take this handout and perhaps draw a box either off to the side. You could try the 1-point, and then I want you to try the 2-point. It's also possible in 10 minutes after we do that, you could think about how would all of these lines work. This is a barn that's drawn correctly. If you had another sheet of paper behind it, you could see exactly where the vanishing point would be if you had drawn this barn, okay? Because all of them would go to that point. And the same thing would happen here. So it's more than anything else, following these rules will help you see without even having to do all the ruler line drawing. It will help you see perspective. So I believe in doing these exercises. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to pause. I'm going to make sure everybody has paper and ruler, and we're going to do these 2 exercises, a 1-point and a 2-point. Thank you for trying the exercise. If you caught on, I'm just impressed. And if you're still kind of wavering, I think you'll catch on when we start doing the drawing for our painting today. But I felt as though this wonderful example that Sandy had, and she allowed me to show this to you, is a street scene in Europe. Where is this, Sandy? It's beautiful.
City in Ireland.
Ireland. Well, what happens with each of these buildings as they go back into space, it's a great example of the fact that all buildings are always straight up and down. You know, sometimes we see these buildings that lean. Now, old barns may lean, but you've got to remember that the corner of a building is always straight up and down. But look what happens. Now, obviously, this is a 3-story building, and next to it is a 2-story. But next to it is a 2-story, then next to it is a 3-story, and this one goes higher. But what happens as these buildings go back into this space, is the perspective here is that they get smaller. Now, this would be a very hard one to pick the vanishing point because of the curvature of, so that's why I say, know the principle behind perspective, but it won't always work in terms of putting the vanishing point on your piece of paper. But knowing where your horizon line is, knowing where your eye level is, will help you immensely. This is also another beautiful example. She's shot this photo out of a bus window, I'm guessing, and yet you can see that as the road goes back into space, it's wide here and it's narrow here. And we're all familiar with that concept of diminishing lines. That's called linear perspective. This is called linear perspective. But we also have something called atmospheric perspective. And Sandy, I'll get that back over to you. This is an example of one-point perspective, and it's a Vincent van Gogh painting. And the vanishing point is back here, and all the lines of the building go back. If we were using a straight edge, everything goes back to that point, even the column lines here, okay? See the columns out here. So Van Gogh was painting, I go to the Ringling Museum and I see all those loggia columns and they just get smaller and smaller, but yet they all zoom back to this. Even the floor goes back to that point. So that's what helps your eye to have perspective. The other kind of perspective is called atmospheric perspective. An atmospheric perspective is, see this whole little body of building and trees, and yet way off here, these little tiny buildings, and they lose detail. Well, it's actually trees, and I don't think you can even see very much here. But the point is we have enough of a suggestion that things are going on in the background, the immediate background, and the faraway background that help to create a sense of space. We call that atmospheric perspective. All right, to jump into our exercise for today, I started a little sketch based on what I want to do. And I think I'm just going to focus on the potted plants and not get to all of this architecture. This was my original idea, but I believe that we can be very successful with doing a smaller rendering of just the pots, and maybe we could add a little bit of the building if we want to, but there's a bamboo grove, and we were just finishing last week or 2 weeks, several weeks ago, we were playing with a little oriental brushwork and we were enjoying our bamboo. Well, we're going to treat it a little differently this time, but I think we'll still have fun with that. This is also something else I want to keep in mind is the way John Singer Sargent painted. He created this work of art right here in the early 1900s. So it's interesting that he was such a wonderful artist, and he worked in watercolor because most artists during that time were working in oils. He also worked in oils too, but he did some beautiful watercolors. At Selby Gardens, I observed this little platform, and I'm going to show you now that I'm not going to actually do a perspective. I'm not going to take these lines out and find the vanishing point, but I am going to think about my eye level being somewhere around here, and that these lines will have to go and this will have to get smaller in this direction. Is this seen? Can this be seen fairly well?
No,
all right.
it's a reflection. Julia, could you put that shade down behind you?
So if could I tilt this a little
Thank you,
different?
that's not it.
Maybe the light itself.
I don't know where the glare is coming from.
So we see
Could I shift this a little differently,
Well,
maybe?
could we turn the overhead
light
light
on?
off?
Maybe the light on.
Maybe.
Oh, we've done that before, and it does help, I think. Okay, let me know if that's going to work, Jim. All right.
Push off. Thank you.
Okay.
No,
That's
Better.
it didn't do
I can finally
anything
see
but here.
something.
Wow, we haven't had that problem before, so I don't know how to fix it.
I sat
Um,
over there.
Jim, could you make the
That's why I
lights
did
dim? Just give us a little more light. I think
You can turn it back on, well.
I think we're good.
6 says it's pretty good. Shall we just go with it?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
It is for her, but it isn't,
Oh, okay.
Now, this has been drawn. with in mind that there is a vanishing point out here, and that these, you know, you don't have to do the vanishing points with your drawing.
I wish your pen was a little bit darker.
I can draw darker.
Okay.
Typically, I would keep my lines light for watercolor, but for the sake of everybody seeing, let's go a little darker. We'll just make that work. So the pots, I decided I would make, there's also something else going on here. There's another road, and this would have to be somewhat parallel, but moving in that direction. And I didn't want to draw the back of this because now I have to put either I'm putting these large pots in here, or I'm going to use the smaller pots that I see in my illustration here. As a matter of fact, if you have different pots at home, you could illustrate with them. Now I will be able to see into the openings of these pots, and they have a particular rounded shape, and that's going to help them have a three-dimensional effect. There's another thing that happens as we determine where the shadows are going to happen on our painting. Typically, I'm going to do that with color, but I'm planning my design right now, and right now what I want to do is get 3 pots in a row, not just 2, but these could vary in size, because otherwise I'll be a little scrunched for shape, for space, since I've stopped my little block right here. These are going to be 3 pieces of pottery sitting on a ledge, and it's not a fence, and it's not, but I'm going to fill them up with flowers and plants. So the plants that are actually growing in here are very pointy, and I want to kind of bring them out into the space just a little bit, since I'm using that as my subject matter. But the other thing is there's a viney thing that's growing. Petunias, Jim, what are those plants? Have you any idea? I don't remember either. We were just at beautiful Selby.
Geraniums, I think, they're not sure.
Oh, geraniums? No, honey.
No.
They're you know what? I'm making them geraniums because that's a great idea. Guess what? You can make them anything you want to make them.
Creative license.
Creative license. So I'm repeating. I'm kind of repeating my idea with the plants. The ledge must have enough space to occupy the pots, and now we're going to also deal with the shadows that will help to create that sense of depth. I'm going to put in a little bit of the building, and I think I'm just using the space. I'm doing an artistic decision here of letting this line come down, and maybe just the edge of a roof line. And what this will do is help that sense of perspective. And I think that instead of drawing all the detail on the wall, although I would be very happy if anybody wants to add this much detail to the background, you're welcome to do that. But for the sake of getting the painting done right now, I'm going to let this just fall as be a wall.
Did you use, what perspective did you use?
We're using 2-point perspective because this goes this way and this goes this way, and now remember, we're not going to plot our points out here, but that's where they would be. So what you have to observe, even in the photograph, is that as this block of lines move this way, it gets smaller. As this block goes in this direction, it gets smaller. Next week, when I do the bench and we add some flowers to that, the bench is going to be drawn as like an architectural rendering, and we will plot the points. We'll make sure it's accurate. We can get away with a little fudging here, so this is how we're going to get it started. To begin the painting, I'm going to start with some washes, and I'm going to use a flat and then move to some rounds. And I want to begin with some color. And remember, I'm keeping in mind the beautiful work, daring compositions, transparent washes, and lights and shades are typical of the way we would find paintings by John Singer Sargent. He liked a daring composition. I don't know how daring this is, but we have given it an angle. And we can throw some shadows and some things in the background to make this interesting. I'm going to, yes, you want me to straighten something? Is that not straight? You want me to straighten it? Does it look crooked? Can you get me a ruler? Is this needed to be? Because I'm going to do this. If you're not sure if something is straight, go with the ruler, make a mark, go up with the ruler, and make sure that it's straight. If you say this one too, go like this, and make a little mark, and then slide it up and see if it's in the right. I think it might be just the way, I think it's, you know,
Looks good to me.
It's good, looks
okay.
good.
So sometimes it looks a little distorted, but this should be a perfectly straight line. Okay. Maybe I've got too many lines there. Is that better, Jim? Do you know the story of Michelangelo's David that he carved? Do you know that story? I'm going to keep the ruler. Okay. Do you know that? Do you know the story of Michelangelo's David? So Michelangelo's David, it was a sculpture that took him 3 years to complete. And when he was finished, he brought it to the man who commissioned the city council, basically, who was in charge. I'm just doing a really quick orangey wash right now, just to get something started. And he said, well, it's perfect except for the nose is too big. And Michelangelo said, well, I can fix that. And he picks up his mallet and his chisel, and he gets some plaster dust in his hand, and he climbs. He's carved it in marble, and he's been 3 years doing it. He gets up on there, and he taps away, lets the marble dust fall from his hand. And when he climbs down, he hasn't touched the nose. He's just tapped away and let the marble dust fall. He says, is that, 30 minutes later, he says, is that better? He says, now it's perfect. Okay. So thank you, Jim, for the correction. All right. So what I'm going to do with a cement, and I'm going to let this stay white, but I think I might give a color to the building. I might paint it salmon. We're creating a rendering of something that we're trying to have a loose. We want to play with our colors. I was using a little cerulean blue and a little cobalt blue, and then I even picked up a little purple, because this is going to be a much darker side to the concrete. And I love using a flat brush because it allows me to create some texture and also to cut into, this form. I feel like it needs a little color, a little warmth in here. So I've just laid in a loose wash here, just sort of to get started. And I want to have fun with color, not getting too carried away, although I thought, what about a little orange or pink out here? Ooh, no, I'd like to have that for the building. That I'm going to reserve for the building. So I'm going to get rid of this pink. That's not what I want right here. It's not going away, so let me see. I'll keep putting gray. I'll just turn it into a little bit more. Well, I guess it's just going to be a brown. Okay, that's all right. I think that's fine. I want to actually put some shadows across that anyway, and I'll show you. This needs a bit of a line to continue out here, so that we know that this path. As a matter of fact, if I recall, the path is turning here. The path would keep going, and maybe we can even accentuate that idea of perspective with the path going off and some different colors that are here. I know I'm going to do those bamboos here and have a little bit of light greenery, and I might even have a peak of sky showing right here, and that's going to add to depth. And our whole objective today is to play with perspective and make something that looks like it's going into space. Since I had the blue, I thought, well, I'll put my wash here for the sky, and that way I've already indicated what'll be there. And I wanted a little bit more of a wash. I try to do my strokes in the direction of that object. So this is a flat ground, this is a cement walk, and here is another wall that might have it's going to also have some shadows to it. And that wall will be there. And then I wanted to paint something a little bolder to be for my wall back here. And you know, it does have a window. I don't know if I want to put in, if I did do a window, then the window would need to have a little framing and possibly have the same bit of perspective going on. So that means that this window, this line would be longer than that line. And maybe the two windows is a good idea. And Jim, you're right, this one is a little crooked. Then I think that idea of having the window is good right here. So typically I have my sketch before I start painting, so I don't like putting my ruler on top of my watercolor painting, but I do want to have the design to work, because remember, daring design, loose brush work, and lights and shadows. That's what I want to accomplish, as well as creating a sense of perspective. All right, so with the building, and I did want to give the building a nice color, and then I'm going to start with my plants and a bit of background with these trees, which I will do some negative painting. And I probably, just to get everybody started today, as I probably will not completely finish, but you will use this as a reference for the finished look. All right, so here I'm going to add some greens, and the green that I use is a Skip's green, a light green, and I switched to the round brush just to get that started. Now, we have been practicing a sumi brush, which means that we take the brush and use use our wrist action to kind of make that. And I think that applies in some of the cases, even though the bamboo might not be exactly the same kind of strokes that we would suggest in here. I'm using some green since I've got it on my brush. Now I'm going to go a little darker. I just threw a little purple in with the green so that I can darken up some of these dark greens that are here, and starting to get a little more contrast in the plant itself and some of the foliage that's going to be happening back here. Because I painted this the other day, I know that it takes layer, layer, layer. In other words, it doesn't just happen on the first stroke or two. You have to build your darks. So here with building dark, I'm using dark colors: burnt sienna, viridian green, cobalt blue, my amethyst, my purple. I don't have a black, so what I have to do, and I don't want a black, I want a dark color that is pretty. So each time I put a little different color in here to make that happen. When I want something to pop out, like these plants in the foreground, I have to do a little negative painting to make those pointy shapes of the plants show up. At the same time, I'm also trying to make these bamboo trees that are light show up between the dark spaces that I'm putting in here. So this little round brush is something that I like to play with, and I would recommend that today that you get started with this painting and that you work on it on your own to finish, because I don't think that even in 2 hours, even though I was able to do mine in about 2 hours, I have used a lot of your time to think about perspective, and I don't want you to rush, but I do want you to try, even if you get partially through with your painting. Now, I'm going to throw in some shadows, and I'm also going to use some of this dark to make the black or the dark window holes here. This has a sense of reflection, but it is a very dark color, and it's a little too purple for me, so I'm still putting green in and maybe a little bit of burnt sienna. And honestly, I would have done my flat brush, but I had the little round brush and I wanted to get the contrast and show you how dark you must get to get this done. And I need more green because I just added a lot of red, and green and red can make a beautiful dark. Now this has some reflection, and sometimes you see these shapes that happen in windows so that they're not so dark. And after I get the darkness done, I'll come back and add a little water to it. Here I'm working around the plant, and it's nice to have that contrast. Okay, and pretend I've also done that one. I would just take a little water on another brush and add the water. And there you have some reflection going on with the glass. Okay, so in this pot, well, I have some nice darks. You can see that this particular pot does have some earth in it. You can see that it's nice and dark up here around the rim where the dirt would be, and probably a little browner. It's very, very dark. And then the red flowers and some lighter green leaves. Just putting in a few more darks at the top of this pot and this pot as well. This is helping to define the edge of the pot. You know, before I put I just think I want to do a little bit with the shadows from the pot itself. So there I have put a little shadow. And I'll do the same thing here. Bye. Who had to leave? Did Larry? Oh, Larry's still sticking with me. How did you get your appointment changed, Larry?
I called.
I said, good for you. All right, so you get the idea with the pots. So let me do a little bit of reflection here, because I do want you to get started. And I do apologize that we began late, and it sort of messes people up with their schedule when we have to do that. All right, this is going to be a little bit blue for the shadows and the reflections. And it's important to note that all shadows fall on the surface on which they, and the blue is a nice idea to stick into the shadow of these pots, even while they're still wet. But notice the beautiful colors that are going on. I could even get darker. I'm letting Sargent inspire me with those colors. Now, what's happened here is that we have a very dark shadowed side, not quite as dark as that window, but we want this to read as shadowed. What happens here now is that shadows are falling from behind this platform and up against the wall. And notice that I turned my brush to make the shadows here. And the shadows are coming from the plants. So the plants are going to be making the pot itself. And maybe there's some trees back in the background over here, because they're going to be making marks on this wall to look like, as a matter of fact, they're making marks here. They're flat here, and then they're coming down like this, and then they're flat here, because these shadows are coming from just, I see it in both photographs. It's they're playing up against the wall here. So I'm using a blue-gray, but the wash is already there, and we could just make it look like tree limbs, because that's probably what's being cast as far as those shapes. Okay, so that's what's going on around and on the ground. And then we have the greens that are behind in the landscape. And so I'm using a yellow, any of your yellows, and I'm using a light green to suggest, I want to make this a little different back here. This has to be painted again behind the plant. And then I need to go with my palmetto, not my palmetto, but my bamboo. Okay. And this will be a tree or a bush. It's coming out here. And I'm going to integrate it into that shape a little bit. But I like the fact that this is getting darker as it goes behind this plant and creates a background. Okay. And then here I have another, there's a lot of yellow green in that one spot. I don't know if I can get that there now, but maybe so, because I think there's a lot of light catching back here. Okay, I also want some greens before I add my red. I'm about to lose my spots where I can put my red, and that will go here. Whether they're the geranium plants or, and I like the fact that they could be geranium, but whatever they are, they're red flowers. And they need to go in white places, otherwise they become brown on top of other colors, unless you don't mind them being in the shadows a little bit, and then I just add some blue purple to let them be in the shadows. And that can be the case. All right, so I'm going to finish this. I'm going to put some browns here in the trunks, and I'm going to put more dark greens in the leaves, and I will get darker and darker as I move the background to appear a little bit more like this background. Okay, so I hope you will get started with your sketch and that you will be comfortable trying the perspective, and let's have fun.